that modern-day prophets and other religious and cult leaders all too often get to be on the news for the wrong reasons. Instead of leading their followers on a path to salvation and everlasting life, their flocks are often indoctrinated and abused, sometimes even killed, and fleeced out of their money, of course. In this video we will briefly cover only a few of these leaders. I personally find some of the things that they made their followers do hard to believe, but at the end of the video I will let an expert explain about cult leaders and their extraordinary hold on people. Let's start with Jim Jones, who in 1977 ordered hundreds of his followers to commit suicide as what he called a revolutionary act. In the 1950s, when Jim Jones was still in his 20s, he founded what was later to be known as the People's Temple Church, of which he was the self-ordained minister. In the 1960s he relocated his congregation from Indiana to San Francisco, where in 1976 the mayor appointed him to the city's housing authority. After a slew of negative publicity about the temple's members being physically and mentally abused by Jones, he relocated in 1977 with about 1,000 of his followers to the Guyanese jungle, where he promised to create an utopian community for them. They were subjected to harsh living conditions, however, and punished if they questioned their leader's authority. In November of that year, a U.S. representative arrived at what was called Jonestown to investigate allegations that temple members were held against their will. Jones had the representative ambushed and killed on his way back to the United States, and then ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced juice. Those who resisted were forced to do so. Jones himself died from a gunshot wound to the head. Prior to the 9/11 attacks, the Jonestown tragedy marked the single largest loss of U.S. civilian lives in a non-natural disaster. The Order of the Solar Temple was an apocalyptic cult found in Europe in 1984 by Joseph de Mambrou and Luc Jouret. They preach about impending environment disasters and the coming end of the world, along with a belief system that combined elements of the New Age philosophy, Christianity and astrology. De Mambrou, Jouret and 51 of their followers committed suicide or were murdered in Switzerland and Quebec, Canada in October 1994. In December 1995, 16 more members committed suicide or were killed in France, while an additional 5 members took their own lives in March 1997 in Quebec. They left a note indicating that they believed their lives would continue on a new planet circling the star Sirius. Now from the Americas and Europe to Japan. Chizuo Matsumoto, or Asahara as he was called, established Aum Shinrikyo in the 1980s. Aum Shinrikyo, or Supreme Truth, was a religious organization that promoted Buddhist and Hindu concepts, along with elements of the Bible and prophecies of Nostradamus. Later, Asahara claimed that he could read minds and levitate. In 1990, he and some of his followers ran for parliament, but lost. In 1995, members of Aum Shinrikyo released sarin, a poisonous nerve gas, on 5 crowded subway trains during morning rush hour in Tokyo, killing 13 people and sickening thousands more. They targeted a station in the area where many of Japan's government offices were located as part of what they thought would be an apocalyptic battle with the government. Asahara was found hiding out at his group's compound near Mount Fuji and arrested some months after the attacks. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 2004 and was executed on July 6, 2018. Some use the title Saint before the name of Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh Insan of India. To me, the title paints an image of purity, integrity and peace, a person who gives all for the uplifting of his fellow human beings. Mr. Singh does not fulfill this expectation. As head of the Dera Sacha Saudi cult, DSS, he released several albums and films which revolves around himself and his teachings. In these films he is usually credited as director, writer, songwriter, actor and various other roles, but the films are generally criticized for their poor quality. Ram Rahim was convicted of rape and sentenced to 20 years in prison in August 2017. The conviction led to widespread violence from members of the DSS and clashes with the police, which left several dead and injured. In January 2019 he was convicted of the murder of a journalist and sentenced to life imprisonment. He also faced prosecution for other murders and enforcing the castration of hundreds of his followers. Definitely not a saint. It is worth mentioning the controversial pastor TB Joshua of Nigeria and some other interesting spiritual leaders in South Africa. As founder and charismatic leader of SCOAN, Synagogue Church of All Nations, Joshua has been publicly denounced, called an impostor and even a son of the devil by a fellow pastor. TB Joshua is very popular throughout Africa and Latin America, and his YouTube channel called Emmanuel TV boasts more than 1 million subscribers and with more than 3.5 million fans on Facebook. He has been described as the Oprah of evangelism and been awarded various accolades. Of course, there are many claims of miraculous healings and prophecies that came true, although some claim that the prophecies are too vague. He also predicted that Hillary Clinton would win the election in 2016, and that the noise of the coronavirus would be silenced before the end of March 2020. He did not predict that his guest house in Lagos would collapse and that more than 100 people would die in this catastrophe. In South Africa, Lethebo Rabalago has been dubbed the Doom Pastor, or the Prophet of Doom. That is because he sprayed his followers with this insect repellent, which he claimed can cure HIV, cancer and various other ailments. In an interview, Babalago stated that he had sprayed the face of one woman because she had an eye infection and claimed the woman was just fine because she believed in the power of God. The self-styled prophet Lesego Daniel from Pretoria instructed members of his congregation to drink petrol. In 2014, website pages of his church, Rabboni Ministries, showed followers also eating flowers and grass on his orders. Prophet Rufus Pala from Polokwane made his church members drink Dettol in order to be healed. It is anointed as the wine Jesus turned into water and tastes like pineapple juice, he said. It healed sickness, and while it could be dangerous to take under normal circumstances, this time it was given through the power of God. My name is Pastor Penuel Nguni from South Africa, a General Overseer of End Time Disciples Ministry based in South Africa. I am popularly known as the Snake Pastor due to the demonstration that took place in my ministry when I gave live snakes to my congregants to eat. This was said by Snake Pastor Penuel Nguni in an interview on Emmanuel TV hosted by Prophet TB Joshua in June 2017. He also gave his followers stones to eat, which he claimed he turned into bread, rats and small lizards that were turned into chocolates, and also hair, petrol, ants and toilet paper. He even drove a car over congregants. The man and the woman lay down on the ground covered with a piece of cardboard and a light blanket, and after the car had gone over their midriffs, they stood up, jumped around and praised the Lord for the miracle of life. From eating snakes to handling dangerous rattlesnakes. The religious rite of snake handling, also called serpent handling, is observed in a small number of rural churches, mostly in the United States of America. The practice began in the early 20th century in Appalachia and plays only a small part in the church service. Practitioners believe serpent handling dates to antiquity and quote the Gospels of Mark and Luke to support the practice. Those who die from the snake bites are never criticized for lack of adequate faith. It is believed that it was simply the deceased's time to die. The practice of snake handling in the United States is illegal, but is often not punished because of the very small communities that practice it. Law enforcement is often related or close friends with those that practice, and so tend to turn a blind eye. David Koresh is the last charismatic leader in this video before the expert tells us how these leaders manage to gain and hold control over their followers. David Koresh, born Vernon Howell, legally changed his name to Koresh and became the Branch Davidians leader in 1990. Koresh's teachings included the practice of spiritual weddings, which enabled him to bed God-chosen female followers of all ages. He fathered at least a dozen children with members other than his legal wife, Rachel Jones. Koresh claimed that he had cracked the code of the 7 seals in the book of Revelation, which predicted events leading to the apocalypse. He told his followers that the Lord willed the Davidians to build an army of God, and they started stockpiling weapons. When the authorities got wind of this, the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms raided the Branch Davidians compound near Waco, Texas. A 4-hour gunfight ensued, wherein 6 of the Davidians and 4 agents were killed. This led to a 51-day standoff between the federal agents and the Davidians. On April 19, 1993, the FBI launched a tank and tear gas attack on the compound. Fire spread through the compound and left more than 6 dozen inhabitants dead. David Koresh was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. How are leaders able to order their followers into mass suicides and war with authorities? What power do they yield to let men willingly be castrated and women to be kept as sex slaves? Janja Lalich, a cult researcher and professor emerita of sociology at California State University, had this to say. I'd say first and foremost, probably every cult leader is a narcissist, and the extent to which his or her narcissism is negative, as one scholar called it, traumatic narcissism, that's going to have an effect on how the group is shaped. Each leader has been given this special status by the people who are in awe of him. Charismatic leaders tend to be intuitive. They're able to read people. They thrive on chaos. They'll create crisis situations. When they walk in a room, you never know if they're going to be good and kind-hearted or be mean and call someone out or create some kind of dangerous situation. Cult leaders typically make tantalizing promises, either to change the world, change you, make you rich, make you beautiful, but it's really important for people to be savvy consumers and really check someone out before you give yourself over. I will leave a link to this article below in the description. Thanks for watching. Please comment below and subscribe to the channel.